a lot of our, a lot of people in this market, they're kind of still strapped into here's the four walls.
Yeah.
Where we realize that those walls are getting blurry and they're kind of going away. And what we need to do is be an enabling technology in the middle of it all.
First thing we should get on the record is we have an addiction to coffee here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So just give me a little background on like the two of you consume more coffee than probably any executive.
I think he would say he doesn't.
I'm a rookie.
Yeah.
I'm an amateur.
Yeah. I think it's from my experience doing go lives. It's just, because you're up, we usually do 12-hour shifts at go live. And then so we do the 12-hour shift, but then me just being, whatever, I'd be staying for half of the next shift. And so I'd be there for like 16 hours and so I just kind of got this coffee habit. And my wife used to have a coffee business, as you know, right? Patty had a coffee business. And so we were both like coffee a lot, but she likes, let's just say I'm a volume drinker.
You are volume.
So that's
You're the bulk location.
Yes, I am the bulk location, exactly, right. And so she's got her little like 1.5 cups a day, and I said, oh, that's so cute. So the coffee thing.
Sounds like you hear a nurse, like nurses talk about how much coffee they drink in a 12-hour shift.
Yeah.
There's some similarities there, right?
Yeah.
With a nurse and a.
Well, I think go lives.
Warehouse, right?
Yeah, go lives. There's usually there's the go live snack table, which is like all carbs, right? And then there's usually just a giant air pot of coffee or something like that. And so I don't do a lot of carbs, but I do consume. I consume like they would just take that air pot, just place it like wherever I'm sitting. So
Black coffee. You either kind of eat at the carb table and then you got a big problem, or you just have black coffee.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the ticket for go lives.
All right. Well, let's talk about talking about warehouse leaders, right? And how they should be thinking about a very hot topic, robotics and automation. What should their approach be? Did they need to rush into it? Like, how do they figure out what technology works for them? Break that down.
Well, I would say there's a lot of different technologies out there. And I always say that, you want to start with a long-term vision, but have nice short-term, intermediate goals. Because you start with a long-term vision, let's say that your vision is, or the thing you're trying to achieve really is scalability or, FTE reduction or something like that. That's sort of your long-term goal. But there's a lot of, especially robotics, there's a lot of small steps you can take in this direction, because a lot of the robot vendors will, they operate sort of as a robots as a service model, and many of them will do a pilot for you for, a very inexpensive amount of money. And to me, that's, if you have the long-term vision, sort of vet out your choices there, and then take short steps to validate the ROI, right? Because that's ultimately, along the road. It's more of a journey than a destination, right? So I think that's what I always talk about is get a long-term set of goals and then set very good short-term discrete gates for analyzing how you're doing against especially robots, because robots are a lot easier than bolted down technology, right? Because it used to be like we do this whole big design thing and you'd spend $2 million on your sortation system. It's a little late at that point to have any regrets about what it is, right? Because it's all built. But with
your product changes,
and then your order profile changes, and then you're screwed, right? So it's like with in today's world, I think you could do a lot with less bolted down stuff, whether that's robotics or some of the GTP, the goods to person stuff can work on conventional racks, right? So you don't have to build special racks for it. So you can work it in. And now there's still a lot of technology out there that's purpose-built. AutoStore is a good example of that, 3-dimensional storage and the variants of stuff that's like that. When you do that, you're in. But there are options really that allow you to take stair-steppy approach into it, and I think you vet out you vet out those vendors and say, okay, what things can I work through that way versus taking a big gulp of a big capex kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think it's, comes down to all of the different, you said they're purpose built, and you kind of look at it, and if you walked around Modex or any of the shows, you see it. There's, dozens and dozens, hundreds of different robotics and automation vendors, and they each have their specialty. And the introduction of new players this year, just compared to last year, is staggering. And then players that were there last year are gone.
Gone, yeah,
So
some of them.
if you're an operations leader, you have to think about how you introduce different robotics pieces or automation pieces into your operation, and you do it with maintaining your optionality.
Yeah.
You just gotta do that, because whatever it is today is going to be, obsolete in 6 months or 12 months, and there's going to be something better. So the notion of having technology that surrounds it, that takes care of much of the integration in a less, with less impedance, and technology that does the orchestration. People call it WES, or you have the control layer, you got the higher level orchestration. All of that has to be philosophically there, and I think it needs to be a little bit unbounded. You have to remove the boundaries of typical thinking, which a lot of people in this market, they're kind of still strapped into, here's the four walls.
Yeah.
Where we realize that those walls are getting blurry, and they're kind of going away. And what we need to do is be an enabling technology in the middle of it all.
Yeah. I think of it as like a battleground. I always think of that the floor now is the battleground for ROI, right? And so there's so many different approaches to that, right? That you can look at the various vendors and how are they reacting to it. And to your point about optionality, you have to have options. Like, so as I said, like, set the long-term goals, like, and frankly, when people talk about this, they a lot of times go in starting to think about reduction in FTEs because of the labor shortage, but that might quickly turn to more of a scalability play, because scalability was one of the biggest factors in automation, right? Because during peak season, right, especially the robot vendors are robots as a service now, you can add 4 or 5 robots for a couple $1,000 a month and start to scale your operation. That's not about an FTE. That's just about meeting your volume so that somebody orders something for grandma and grandma gets her delivery by Thanksgiving or whenever it's supposed to be, right? And so you got to set those, and then as you were saying, it's more of a journey. You have to be able to react to what's going on in the marketplace. So the problem is that when the vendor is already in there, it's not like they're when you hammer, everything looks like a nail. So they speak the way the solution is optimized for them. And the problem is, like, that vendor, yes, that's optimized for that vendor, it might not be optimized for this customer. And so I think that when you stay independent, you can start to say, well, look, I'm going to switch you out in 5 years or 3 years or whatever. And so now I just want to be independent enough to be able to say, when the next thing comes along, I'm not stuck into the way this vendor thought about solving the problem. I'm struck with the idea that I want to solve this problem the way it works for my organization, not the way it works for this vendor.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, right? Because those automation vendors, they're coming in and they want to create value. They create a huge amount of value.
For sure.
It is in a fairly focused, targeted, usage-based, the right kind of space. So don't sacrifice your ability to adapt and really control the whole flow of the warehouse by getting too tied into that solution. You have to look at that solution as it's another tool. It's a different type of racking. It's a different type of material handling, equipment. It's a different type of, narrow aisle reach vehicle, whatever it is. Think about it. It's part of the tool set, and you still have to have the whole system and the orchestration around it. Don't give too much of that control.
Like we said, it's a journey, and some vendors want them to be the destination, right? The vendor wants to be the destination, whereas you need to think about this. Ops folks need to think about this as a journey, because again, ops, they're tasked with, shipping for, with less resources and all the rest of that jazz. And that calculus really changes over time. And you can't be, into this destination of this one vendor when they're not concerned about your destination as an ops person. They're concerned about, what they're trying to sell you. And I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm just saying that's just the reality of the way the process works sometimes.
So the term WES is thrown around a lot. It's not a very well-defined term, but there's, as you guys are talking about, there's lots of opportunity there. How do we define WES at Softeon?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think to that question, everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody's got a different definition. Everybody's got a different scope, range, tier in the operation where it fits. All the way from down at the lowest level of control system, WCS, to visualizing, automation, those kinds of pieces, to then the next level up where you have different areas of the facility and you're managing, you're orchestrating the execution and the flow, and up to the next level, which is coming, where you plug in artificial intelligence technology to look at what's happening in a facility and then either maybe you make suggestions about how you change the flow, or you go reach right in and make changes to the flow of the operation. I think that'll be kind of the final frontier of it all. But to us, warehouse execution really is focusing on, it kind of goes back to that being able to orchestrate across different subsystems, areas, tie it all together, make it flow. That's what it is. It's about sensing things and then taking corrective action.
Yeah, and I think that really where I started to see this back in the early 2000s really was, if you think about like the WCS vendors, the warehouse control vendors, right, which were doing the sortation, automation kind of stuff, and then they would expand their footprint to include pick-to-light and things like that. They had to have a way to describe the fact that it wasn't just control systems anymore. So, a bunch of people started talking about this. So, well, it's an execution system because it can do things, above the pure controls of the conveyor, and then now it can do pick-to-light or carousels at the time, and ASRSs and things like that. So they just needed a different language. And so what happened, like a lot of the WES originally kind of went from the floor upward, right? And so they would be able to do across, their equipment, right? As long as you bought it all from them, they could kind of coordinate across their equipment. And I think a huge advantage from our perspective is like, we see things not only from that level, we can get those kind of inputs coming from the floor, but we actually, the bigger part of things, I think, is having a more global view of that orchestration. Back pressure on the order side, right? SLA is about pickup times, right? Your next day airs usually are early in the evening, second days are later. How are you coordinating that? And then how are you then pushing orders to the following business day that don't meet your SLAs? So you manage to level out the volume across days, right? And so the WCS vendors that turned into the WES vendors, they're great at the floor level stuff, but they are lacking at the more global visibility. And also they typically have issues when it comes time to do multi-vendor orchestration, because they came up from the floor with their stuff and it works great with their stuff, but it doesn't sometimes work with other people's stuff. So I think that WES idea needs to be more than just the floor stuff working a little better. It needs to be orchestration across multiple vendors against different data streams coming, order volumes and SLAs, and also things coming from the floor, in order to give you the best ROI from your execution system, your warehouse.
Yeah, and it sounds a little self-serving, which maybe it is, but I think that if you don't have the visibility across all the areas, all the orders, all the locations, if you don't have that kind of global visibility to inform your WES, and then have the ability to reach into the execution areas of your WMS, I don't know how a WES really fulfills the higher level promise. So the ones that are coming up from the floor, they're just going to hit a ceiling.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it is a natural it's a natural extension and evolution of what WMS is, and
Right.
I guess in my philosophy, our philosophy.
Yeah, and I think that some of the WMS vendors are trying to look downward from like the order volume downward, but then they also have issues then from the floor upward. So I think that middle ground of being able to do both things is pretty rare. And again, I think it does sound self-serving to say that, but it's true that that's where the problem space is. Like, some people, will say, oh, we have a WS now, and I can see downward, an order pressure and see stuff going on, but they're missing the stuff coming up from the floor because that's harder stuff to accumulate, right? Those kind of observations coming up from the floor, just hard like to get and rationalize and to take actions on. Like we talk about like a photo eye being black. Well, a photo eye being black means nothing to me. A photo eye being black for 30 seconds means something to me, right? And have that level of understanding of, what that means. And does that mean I'm gonna, temporarily change my lane routings or whatever? That's the kind of stuff that people have struggled with, right? And so having both views of that, I think, is unique. And to me, it really sets us apart. But it is a problem that people are just going to, other vendors are going to just have to be better at, really, because that does describe the problem.
If you want to kind of build systems, platforms that just say, here's my APIs and I'm going to publish APIs, it's a very kind of one-dimensional approach where the technologies that you've created that we have now are they just allow you to have that dialogue with less impedance. So
Right.
it's about describing the messages or the kind of the way things are going, and then the protocol for passing them back and forth, and all of those different mechanisms are encompassed in this for the express purpose of saying you're talking, one language, we're talking a different language, we can map them together very easily. And it's kind of counterintuitive because a lot of the vendors are just like, well, I don't really have to talk to everybody else because I have everything for you. And
Yeah.
we're on the opposite end of that spectrum saying, we're going to make it as easy as possible to talk to everything because, we understand this is a very heterogeneous platform of different pieces and automation solutions to get you where you want to be.
Yeah.
Throughput.
I think one thing that you'll hear vendors talk about as if it's like, the thing to worry about, like to the point about management they'll say, okay, we have these APIs, and they think, okay, well, that solves the problem. And it really doesn't solve it is a part of the solution, right? But it doesn't solve the problem of saying, okay, like the APIs often they talk about interactions, but they don't talk about flows, right? And so, any system like this is all about flow. And if you've ever been into a well-running warehouse, it's like a duck swimming, right? It just doesn't, it looks effortless at the surface, but there's all kinds of activity going on, underneath. And so it should feel effortless. And so the flow, right, getting that flow right, that's the whole thing. And so APIs are part of the solution, but they are not the solution. So I think what people lazily say is, oh, we have APIs, like, wave it off to say we have APIs. Well, that's really not the solutions, is part of it. And so what you're speaking about is this idea to say, look, our approach is to say, look, we don't want different vendors to change to suit like the flow. What we'll do is we'll say, our technology says, look, talk in whatever your favorite way of talking is, whatever the thing you QA most, the thing that's most commonly used and the most solid thing you have. And then we will use our technology, our elastic communicator technology, to say, we'll just flip it around to suit our needs. And now the vendors, like the biggest problem that you have like during a go live is like all the vendors need to be commissioned before you at the same time so you can get this thing live. Well, if you're asking them to change, right, do stuff, that's just tick-tock time, right, on the schedule. That's if you say, okay, let's give us what your normal, APIs are, don't change anything, and then let us coordinate the differences. It's a game changer because now you're not asking them to do anything other than just deliver their hardware and then just use the most commonly used APIs. So I think that's part of from a project and just the philosophical perspective is been a problem because people want to coerce these vendors into changing the messages or whatever, and that's just time. And during commissioning, which is the last mile of getting a system up and running, that's going to kill you during commissioning because it just adds all kinds of extra steps.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really a fascinating time to be, kind of part of this market, right?
Yeah.
With this infusion of all this technology and automation and different ways to approach the platform, just the actual solution, because we always say the next 10, 15 years is not going to be like the last 10, 15 years. And where it exactly ends up, I don't know. I like to pretend I'm a futurist, but I don't think anybody really knows. Is the end game, kind of humanoid robots that replicate what typically people have done in a facility? Probably not. I don't necessarily think that humans were the best, most efficient kind of way to material handle everything. So,
they're oddly shaped and they tip over. And
so there is going to be this evolving mix of all kinds of different things that have to really collaborate with humans.
Exactly.
And the having a philosophy about how you pull this all together and an execution system that allows it to flow, it's just really critical.
Yeah, I think you're speaking about, we try to be very agnostic, right? And, we did that architecture all those years ago. We just didn't have the technology that we have now, the messaging technology, everything that we've put to play in the last 4 or 5 years with our new platform is stuff that just didn't exist even 6, 7 years ago. And it just changes the game. It changes the way we talk to each other technically. It changes the way we flow, all the product flows together. It's a game changer for us. And we were early adopter in that technology starting around 2016. And, we've used it extensively and evolved it. And, when we were acquired by Softeon, it allowed us to invest even more in that technology and add it to our WES capability. And it's a game changer.
Yeah. So my advice, I think, the question started a long time ago about from an operations professional, what would you do? What is your advice with automation and robotics? And to me, it's more about finding a platform and a partner that will allow you to test and retest and move things in and move things out, and take advantage of the innovation cycles that are happening right now and those that are coming. Those are going to be the people that really win.
Yeah.
If you recognize it's more about how you orchestrate and collaborate between different subsystems and humans, that's the people that will be well positioned,
right,
I think, for the future.
Right, because without that, you're stuck in a technology that gets you a certain percentage, but might not get you the full percentage of what you could be doing 2 years from now. Right, you don't want to be stuck, right? And so that's really the thing.
Completely. We hear from our customers today.
Yeah,
I'm stuck.
I'm stuck.
Get me
yeah,
unstuck.
yeah,
I
get
bought
me.
this piece of technology, whatever, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and now it's pretty obsolete. It's hindering my operation.
Right, exactly.
Help me get unstuck.
Help me get unstuck, exactly.